Hello everyone! There are a lot of very in-depth and useful guides about this class and how to play it. Most of those though are for trials and high DPS purposes, with a side note to dungeons. While today I'd like to share my setup for the Magicka Templar that I'm currently using for dungeons, with through side notes to the trial content, if only for the more social runs. But before we jump right into detail, first things first, which is scenery. You're currently looking at one of my favorite places in all of ESO, Vardenfell. Specifically, I'm in the town of Voss, in the northeastern part of Vardenfell. Don't miss out on this beautiful place and go explore it yourself. So one of, if not the biggest difference with trials, is the way buffs and debuffs are present in your group. In 4-man content, you'll have to prioritize which buffs you are taking into the fight. For this video, I'm going to tell you a little bit about penetration, as this is important for the choices I made when I set up my Plar. The resistances of bosses is set at 18.2k, which means you will have to build up your offensive penetration to around that amount. There are several ways of doing so. You can equip sets that add offensive penetration, you can equip champion points that add offensive penetration, pieces of light armor will increase your penetration by 939 for each piece worn. Equipping skills and skill passive, they can add to your penetration. Also some racial and class passives. And there is a weapon glyph called Crusher. This is usually worn by the tank. Now some set and skills will add to your penetration and some will decrease the enemy's resistance. For example, skills that apply minor and major breach, sets like Alkosh and Crimson Oath, and a few skills that reduce resistances, like Runing Sunder on the Arcanist and Crystal Weapon on the Sorcerer. For more details, there are penetration calculators that can tell you specifically what you need for your group composition. As for this Magicka Templar, this is what I've come to. My sets of choice are Whirl of the Depth from the Deadsail Reef, Deadly Strikes from Cyrodiil, Felothi's Euromage Amulet, and a one-piece Slime Crawl. Because the penetration cap is at 80.2k, I am running 6 pieces of light armor. Now, I'm going to slowly go through it and feel free to pause the video at any time. So for the weapons, I'm using the Deadly Daggers. Optimal would be 2 charged or 1 charged and 1 precise. What I have is really old and it's not up to the current patch, but it still works pretty well. On the back bar, Maelstrom Inferno Staff, infused with a weapon damage enchantment. For the one-piece monster set, I'm going with Slime Crawl, obviously as it gives you the highest value and the crit chance out of a one-piece monster set. All the body pieces are obviously in Divines and with max Magicka enchantments. On the body, I'm using 5 pieces of Whirl of the Depths. It's a source of Minor Slayer and has a very good single target and AoE 5th piece bonus. Though in very mobile fights, the last AoE portion of the set might be wasted as it drops somewhere on the ground. I'm using 1 piece of Deadly on the shoulder. This is medium armor, so that brings us to having 6 light and 1 medium. Deadly is great for boosting our main spammable and execute, and in both offensive as defensive wise. Lastly, I am using Felothi's Euromage Amulet. Though it decreases the damage of your light attacks, it greatly boosts your overall damage. Being on a class that uses a lot of channeled abilities, you will be light attacking less anyway, especially in Execute with Radiant Glory. It also provides a great deal of offensive penetration, as you can see with the one piece. All pieces on the jewelry should be in Bloodthirsty and with spell damage enchantments. For the skills, I'm using a very well balanced setup that deals great damage but also makes you nearly indestructible. This is why the Templar has such a great class identity that I'm set will lose its charm with subclasses in the next patches. Here's what I use to make the best out of this class's abilities. On the front bar I use Biting Jabs, my main spammable. First of all, it deals a lot of damage, not only to your target but also to enemies in front of you in a conal way. The best thing of the skill though is that whenever you activate it, you will be healing for a percentage of the total damage done, as you can read, but additionally you will get 6 seconds of minor protection for casting it. So while dealing damage, you receive a defensive buff and you get healed at the same time. Because this is a channeled ability, the damage, so also the healing, will be buffed by the Deadly Strike set. The heal from this attack can also crit, meaning you can really heal yourself up to full in no time if your damage is high, making it a great skill for not only damaging enemies, but surviving while doing so. Blade Croak is a very nice damage over time that grants you a few bonuses that you cannot live without in dungeons. First of all, you will receive major evasion for the duration, reducing your AoE damage taken by 20%, and in most dungeons this is what the damage dealer's main source is of danger. It will also give you major expedition for a brief time, which can be enough to do with mechanics that require you to move in and out of certain situations quickly. And lastly, being a weapon skill, it will proc our weapon glyphs on cooldown, as long as we keep it up. Camouflage Hunter, it's there mostly for the passive. It will give us 3% extra weapon damage, like in every Fighter's Guild skill. Major Savagery and Prophecy, but most of all, it's a reliable source of Minor Berserk, increasing our damage by another 5%. Power of the Light is another great single target damage ability. It provides the group with Minor Sorcery, a unique buff to Templars and Dragonites, and it's the reason you would want to have a Templar or a Dragonite present in your group, and it's almost mandatory. It will increase your damage of your spell damage by 10%, but furthermore it applies the Sundered status effect to the target for 4 seconds. This in turn applies Minor Breach and grants you 100 weapon and spell damage. This is easy to overlook, but very nice to have and thus to keep up. Now the execute for this build will be Radiant Glory. While only being a little behind of Radiant Oppression damage-wise, this one heals you for a percentage of the damage inflicted and also restores Magicka, very much needed for sustain. Like our spammable, the heals are affected by our sets, and utilizing this the right way makes it both an overpowered self-heal as a very deadly execute. The ultimate on the front bar will be Flawless Dawnbreaker, also here for the passives, but slightly cheaper than our main ultimate, so you can use it occasionally in mobile fights or at the end of a fight. It will also grant you an additional 300 weapon and spell damage upon usage and deal a ton of damage. On our back bar, we will use the Elemental Blockade morph of Wall of Elements. When leveled, it lasts for 15 seconds, which allows us to do more damage with our spammable in the meantime. When using Unstable Wall of Elements, you would have a 10-second duration and an explosion, but I feel this is the way to go. Especially if you have a fight with a lot of pressure, you don't want to keep up your dots all the time, you want to be spamming your spammables and thus healing yourself. Ritual of Retribution is a very large AoE attack that deals pretty decent damage, but most importantly it provides us with a cleanse ability. Our allies will get a synergy called Purify, and it procs whenever they have a cleansable effect on them. This is a very useful skill to have, as some damage over time abilities can be cleansed. The damage of this ability increases per tick, so make sure you let this expire if it's not needed for an emergency cleanse. Channel Focus is mostly here for our sustain. Templar is a very Magicka needy skill kit. And this rune, it gives you return the Magicka every second. But it does a lot more than that. It gives you major resolve, it heals you, and when you stand inside it, it will boost your healing done by up to 200%. Greatly boosting the healing you do with biting jabs and Brilliant Glory, while also healing and recharging Magicka. Standing in your rune while dealing the damage, you become nearly indestructible. Solar Barrage is a very strong skill because this boosts the damage of your class abilities even more, by 5%. It also deals damage in the same radius as your cloak, and like Power of the Light, it activates the Illuminate passive, granting you and your group minor sorcery, ensuring the uptime on this buff. The same applies for Radiant Glory, but that being an execute ability, you will not use it as much. Blazing Spear is a very niche skill that deals damage very similar to a spammable when it lands. It then becomes an AoE ability that leaves a synergy called Blessed Shards. The synergy allows your allies to restore Magicka or stamina, whichever is higher, and this makes the skill very good in dungeons as attacks often rely on synergies for sustain. Another good reason to use it is you can use this as a spammable. Having it slotted also provides you with an increased crit damage through the Piercing Spear passive, so it now also active on your back bar and not just on your front bar. And like biting jabs, activating this also gives you 6 seconds of minor protection. The main ultimate for the Plar is Shooting Star. It deals insane damage, and when timed right and thrown on a group of enemies, you can have it back quite fast, as it generates 12 ultimate for enemy hits that are by the initial blast. Passively will grant you max Magicka and Magicka recovery through the Magicka controller passive. Though of course very situational, I will provide you with the CP that can never really go wrong, and some alternatives that you can swap in or out. In the blue tree, I am going with Fighting Finesse, Deadly Aim, Thaumaturge and Breathful Strikes. Fighting Finesse, why? It's a constant buff instead of Backstabber, which gives you 2% more damage on the critical. But on the other hand, Fighting Finesse will also boost your critical healing done and Backstabber will not. This would be the all-round best CP for dungeons. Biting Aura, Exploiter, Master at Arms and Force of Nature. There are good alternatives that you can use when the situations require this. Then for the red tree, I'm going with Celerity, Rejuvenation, Fortified and Boundless Vitality. Red is more of a preference CP line in my opinion. These will give you overall good stats, but Siphoning spells can be really nice for sustaining fights where there are a lot of adds. Spirit Mastery on the Templar is just very nice to have, as it will decrease your resurrection time by another 33%. Templars already have got the 20% reduced resurrection speed, so you will resurrect twice as fast as other players will. Expert Evasion can also be a lifesaver in fights where you need to dodge a lot. For the food, I usually go with the Mistral Banana Bunny Hash. It's a buy-stat food, but there are similar ones that do the same thing. Other great options are Clockwork Citrus Fillet, Witch Mother's Proton Brew or Ghastly Eyeball. For potions, I use a variety, sometimes spell potions, sometimes weapon potions, depending on what I need more, Magicka or Stamina. This is the cheap way. You could also go with Heroism Pots or Tripods, but that's only if your group composition allows it, because you will need Major Sorcery and Major Savagery. Usually that's coming from these pots here. And finally, I'm using the Thief Mundus, like everyone. So, I also talked about an alternative to the previous set, and this is it, as you can see listed. Trades, medium, light, all those things are the same, except for the sets. What I'm going with is Suksan, Order's Wrath, with the one-piece Slime Crawl and the Flotti Urmage Amulet. Now with all of that being said, let's dive into some gameplay.